Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a first impressions video on a knife from SOG. Now, if you've been around the channel for a while, you know I have not had a great relationship with SOG knives. I've had a lot of them that I feel like are disappointing. I do sometimes appreciate the designs, and that's why I check them out. But all that had kind of changed, kind of last year, the year before. SOG had really been going in a different direction, a welcome direction, by the way. And this was one of the new knives with the XR lock that came out. Now, what's kind of interesting about this knife is it's very much based on an older, well-established series from SOG. That's the Seal series. You may recall I had the Seal Pup Elite, and I do actually kind of like that knife. It's not a bad knife at all. The steel is not the best for the price point, so it's not a super great value, but the design and the utility of it, I spent some time using that knife and carrying it, and I did enjoy it. So with that said, it was this knife to me kind of represents an interesting knife because it takes all of its styling from a very old, sort of very SOG-ish established series, but it's definitely part of the new, the changes that SOG was making. Like, I think if this was released 4 years ago, it would have like a hollow handle. It would have that horrible, not the ant lock, but a different kind of lock they used to use on a lot of their cheap stuff, and it would just be, a hot mess. Now, with the use of the XR lock and certainly a bit of a different design or a bit of a different build approach with this knife, this is a different animal, and so I think I've got to rethink this. Now, I will say this before I get into some of the specifics. This is also a knife that many of you have asked me about. I've had a number of you recommend it to me, saying, look, the Seal XR is great. It's right up your alley. It's definitely a knife that you would find appealing. If I've also had a number of you ask for comparisons between this and the 8010 and the Recon 1 and a few other sort of harder use knives that you guys know I love. And, so there's a lot of sort of background behind me ending up finally getting my hands on one of these. And I'm actually pretty stoked that I did. And I'm generally pretty happy with it. My initial impression of this knife is good. The quality seems there. The action is nice. It's an enjoyable knife. And it's definitely as big as all of you guys said. Let me quickly give you a rundown on the features here, and then size and weight, and then I'll give you my initial thoughts. Okay, so large knife. Okay, that's the thing I've got to say right off the bat. I'll give you all the specifics in a minute, but for now, it's a big knife. We've got let's start out with the front. So S35 VN with a black coating on it. You can see it shipped with a bit of oil on it. There's a lot of writing on this blade, so that is an observation group, Seal XR in the S35 VN. Over on this side, it points out that this is US made, which is welcome. If you want to take a look at the blade spine here, this is a massive thick blade, probably 3/16 or more. I haven't measured it. Again, this is just a first impression. I'll give you some more detailed numbers in the full review. So that's the blade. We've got the XR lock. It is on bearings and it has a flipper. And I've got to say, in terms of an Axis style lock with a flipper, this is excellent. Definitely the nicest implementation I've ever seen. You may recall Benchmade has tried to do some flippers and it doesn't work out all that well. Now, one thing I've noticed right away is when it comes to this action, the detent is stiff. So if I try to do like a thumb roll on this, I can do it, but I've really got to put some force into it. For some reason, I find I can do it a little easier left-handed. I don't know why that is. The other thing I found is sometimes if you put pressure upward on this and try to deploy the knife, it doesn't work. You've got to be a little bit careful of that. It's sort of like putting your fingers on the lock bar on a titanium frame lock. But with those little hiccups in place, I've got to say overall the action on this is quite good, and I do really like this knife from the standpoint of just deployment and getting it out there and then closing it after. Very nicely done. So SOG, the other thing is rock solid. Very, very solid lockup, no blade play in any direction. And I had given up on SOG ever being able to do that. So thankfully, this is really, really nice from that perspective. In the review, I'm going to give you some pictures of the inside, because the way this works, in order to get this flipper tab to come out around this sort of axis style lock, it's a pretty interesting, mechanical process that they've used, and I've got to give them some credit because it's nicely done. Moving down to the handle, we've talked about the blade, we've talked about the action. Handle here is FRN. That's a bit of a disappointment. I would have liked to see G10 here, but it's not bad. Okay, it's definitely more substantial than a lot of the FRN I've had. Now there is a ton of jimping. Everything on this knife, every surface that you put your hand in contact with has jimping on it. So I guess, the benefit of that is you're definitely not going to drop it. For really, really hard use, I would probably want to wear gloves with this knife. It's actually that aggressive. And I think if you could, if I could do like 10 times magnification here, I'm pretty sure on each of these little jimps, there's like micro jimping, and then there's probably micro jimping on top of that. It is really like, this has a lot of jimping. And again, that does come directly from the Seal Pup or the Seal series of knives. They're heavily, heavily textured. A couple little points here I want to notice that I like. They've nested these liners on the front, but they're proud on the back, sort of a Benchmade-esque approach. They've also removed quite a bit of material. If you look in there, look at the missing material. That is a welcome change. The backspacer is a solid steel backspacer. This is where they could have, I think, cut out a bit of weight. Now the blade here is a big hunk of S35 VN, so that certainly adds some weight as well. But there's a large backspacer. If they, had kind of gone to here with it or something, it may have been different. And then there's this big glass breaker and a reversible pocket clip. The pocket clip does work quite well, I have to say that right off the bat. I'm not a big glass breaker guy, but this one has it. I don't think it takes anything away from the knife, and at least it's reasonably comfortable. You could use this as an impact device if you needed to, so I get the utility of it. Even this way, and there's so much grip here, you're not going to slide off using it that way. Is it necessary, though, is kind of the question. So that's, if I needed to bash something, I probably wouldn't be inclined to use my folding knife. I'd probably get a hammer or some other more appropriate tool. Or if I'm in the wilderness, I get it from a survival perspective, but usually there's a lot of rocks around. So there's usually something you can use as an impact device other than your folder. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of the glass breaker / impact device on folders. So that's my take on all of the little features here. So very quick rundown, that's what you're getting. Size and weight on this, again, it's big. 9 3/16 with the glass breaker here, 8 15/16 without. So if you just don't bother measuring this, if you just measure from here, it does, obviously it's going to be shorter. 3 7/8 on the blade, so almost a 4-inch blade. 5 5/16 closed. All right, so it's going to take up a bit of room in your pocket. The grip area is quite good here, right? Lots and lots of real estate for my hand. You can see even if I had larger hands, I'd still have plenty of room. Okay, now this is a heavy knife for sure. 8 1/4 ounces, so 8.25 ounces. That's hefty. It's not the end of the world. I don't think. I've actually carried this for a couple of days. It came in yesterday. I carried it all afternoon. I carried it all morning. It's not the end of the world. Okay, it's not like carrying a Formax, but it's big and it's up there. So we'll compare this to some other knives as we go ahead, and you'll get to see how that feels, and I'll talk about the differences between this and say a Recon 1 or an AD10 or some other knives that are available out there. And so in closing, right, conclusion time here, first impression on this is pretty positive. There are a couple little hiccups. It could get uncomfortable if you're using this for prolonged use. I'd want to wear gloves. The detent is very stiff, so it actually makes it a little tough to thumb open the knife, but it is possible. Using the flipper tab, it's a big flipper tab with lots of grip, so I've never had a problem with that. And it's kind of one of those things. Do you bump up that detent so you get really nice flipping action the way they have here? I think that was the right choice. I can open it with my thumb, right? So it's not that it's just impossible. And so based on that, I can't really say too much negative about the detent being the way it is. I think this is an enjoyable knife. SOG has done a really good job here. It's a little tactical. It's a little over the top with the SOG labeling. So there are a couple little hiccups, things that I'm not absolutely in love with. But all in all, I kind of like this. It's useful. I mean, it feels useful. It's pretty comfortable in hand. And so there you go, guys. Those are my initial thoughts on the SOG Seal XR. Stick around for some comparisons, and in a little bit of time, I will do a full review where I, talk about the mechanicals and get into a little more detail on cutting performance and that kind of thing. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and also don't forget to use that channel, those channel sponsors down below, White Mountain Knives and Southern Edge Knife Works. That really does help the channel a lot. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.